Today's target will be factoring special cases. By the end of today's lesson, you will be able to factor a difference of squares binomial and identify when a trinomial is not factorable. We call that prime. Before you watch the rest of this video, make sure you've watched both factoring part 1 and factoring part 2. There's nothing new here with factoring. It's the same process, just a couple of scenarios that you need to be aware of and be on the lookout for. We're going to start with what we call a difference of squares binomial. Just like with your regular trinomials, whenever you see completely factor, first thing you look for is a GCF. Here we can divide both of these numbers by 5. So we do that and we're left with x squared minus 4. Here you see why this is called a difference of squares binomial. First off, we know that difference means subtract. And then here on either side, we have perfect squares. So that's where it gets its name. That's not really important here because we're going to factor this the same way we've been factoring. Okay? Start by drawing the box. We put the x squared term in the top left. We put the last term in the bottom right. We need to figure out what's going to go in the other two corners. So we do first times last, which would be 1 times negative 4. First and last gives us negative 4. So we need two numbers that are going to multiply to give us negative 4 and add to give us, well, we don't have a middle term. Here's our issue. If we don't have a middle term, what do? Well, in math, how do we write nothing? Write it with a 0. So we could rewrite this as x squared minus 0x minus 4. So our middle term is actually right there. It's hidden, it's 0, which is why you don't see it written originally. So it needs to multiply to 0 and add, sorry, let me backtrack a second, I said that incorrectly. Multiply to negative 4 and add to 0. Okay? So just like we did previously, our factors of 4 or negative 4 could be 1 and negative 4, or negative 1 and positive 4, or it could be negative 2 and 2. Which of these pairs will both multiply to negative 4 and add to 0? Right here. So we put negative 2x in one corner and a positive 2x in the other. And there we filled out our boxes. Now we can take our GCFs, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this, and I'm going to move it to where we have a little bit of space. Just like what we've been doing, GCFs, take an x from both of those terms, take a negative 2 here, remembering that that negative makes my GCF negative. Across the top, I can take out an x and then a 2. So my answer would be x minus 2, x plus 2, and of course we can't forget about that GCF of 5. So to recap real quick, when you have a binomial, where you got an x squared term and then a constant term without an x, and you've got no middle term, that middle term is 0. So you go through the steps just like we did with any other trinomial. First times the last gives you the number that you need to multiply to, but now you need to add to get 0. It's the only change. All right, factor completely. We've seen a problem like this before. So let's walk through our steps. Step number 1, GCF. Take a 3 out of each of these terms. Leaves us with x squared plus 5x minus 10. Let's write that GCF over here. Okay. Draw our boxes. Put an x squared here, negative 10 here. Do first times last. So that will be 1 times negative 10. Okay, so we need two numbers that multiply to negative 10, add to 5. So we can have 1 times 10, 1 times negative 10, 2 times negative 5, or negative 2 times 5. Those are all of our possible options. Do any of these options add to give us 5? Well, that doesn't. That adds to give us 9. That gives us negative 9. That gives us 3. Sorry, negative 3, and that gives us 3. So when nothing works, in other words, you can't find a pair that adds to that middle number, then we say that trinomial is unfactorable. It's prime. So we can't go any further. So we have nothing to put in our other two boxes, so we can't use that model. We can't do anything else. This is as factor as it gets. So our answer here would simply be the GCF and then the trinomial that was unfactorable. Okay? So you got to be careful for that. If you do go through your steps like you normally would, if you write down all the pairs of factors and nothing adds to the middle term, it cannot be factored any further, and you are done. Okay? All right. So I do have one for you to try. It is a difference of squares binomial. So go ahead and walk through your steps. GCF, remember there's no middle term here, so it's going to have to add to 0. Once you finish, press play, and the answer will come up. You can check and make sure you did everything correctly. Go ahead and pause the video now. Here we go. Make sure you took out that GCF of 3, leaving you with x squared minus 25. Put the x squared in the top left, negative 25 in the bottom right. First times the last gives us negative 25, so we would use 5 times negative 5, because that both multiplies to give us negative 25, and adds to give us 0, because there's no middle term. Please make sure you are including the variables in these boxes here. Some people forget to do that, and it then throws off your answer. Making sure you have the box completely correct. You should have x minus 5 as one factor and x plus 5 as the other. Make sure you also keep in mind that the order here doesn't matter. If you have negative, if you switched these two, your answer might be in a different order than mine. That's okay. As long as one factor is x minus 5, the other is x plus 5, and you include your GCF. That's it for today's video. As always, make sure you bring your notes to class, and you write down any questions you may have had or any concerns that came up while you were watching the video.